was that?
That was Thundera Lion-O.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another cartoon commentary. Joining me today is Mr. Chow. Hans Chow, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me, Michael.
Isn't that so contrived? Because we've just been chatting for like 15 minutes. So, how are you today? Good to see you just now, right now, for the first time in ages, and whatever. But yeah, since I always forget to do the plugs at the end, I want to plug your Instagram. We got some awesome custom artwork over on Instagram. What's the handle there?
I do indeed. Hans_Chow. Check me out there. Do a lot of retro artwork. I've been recently getting into some commission work, which has been a lot of fun. And if you want to talk to me, you can just message me on Instagram. And if not, just be happy enough to watch, and I'll be happy enough to entertain you.
It's cool to see the progress as it goes along. Like you put the sketch up, and then what is it called, inking, when you put in the outline and then the color sometimes. So it's cool to see the evolution of it. And why'd you pick Exodus, Thundercats episode 1?
I have not seen the first episode of Thundercats in, I'm going to say 30 years, but it's probably more. And I remember it being amazing. I remember watching as a child and thinking, but I can't remember anything about it, except that it starts with a space battle. And then I just remember it goes nuts after that. And it's also one of the iconic things. I mean, I could get into the whole idea that Thundercats is this long epic. And it's one of the few that has a beginning as well as a conclusion, as opposed to many of the other series which were either episodic or they were never finished. And that kind of sets Thundercats out and aside from everybody else and it's most of its peers. I think all of its peers almost, except for maybe one or two.
No, it was a Netflix series before Netflix series. It was one of the few with continuity, where they didn't necessarily call them part 1, part 2. I mean, some of the other shows had continuity between their 5-parters, right? Transformers 5-parters in the show. But Thundercats it wouldn't be called part 1 or part 2 of something. And the next episode picks up literally where the last one left off, or where we're repairing the Thunder Tank from the damage of the last episode, or so on.
Yeah, there was a continuity to the whole thing, and the characters remembered the lessons of past episodes and grew with it. So I think that's huge. That's massive.
Yeah, that is so different from so many other shows, because a lot of the other shows, Duke in episode 1 is no different from Duke in the final episode that we see him in, and same with Flint, and even Optimus Prime. And Ironhide doesn't really grow. Cliffjumper, if anything, regresses. But Thundercats really, like, by the end of it, Lion-O is really a very different cat than he was in the first episode.
He's earned his title, as he started off as being titled Lord of the Thundercats, but in the last episode he is the Lord of the Thundercats, which I think that's what you want to do. You want to grow into the title. You want it to be given, and now you're that thing.
I remember there was a series that was called Part 1, Part 2. It was Lion-O's trials, his anointment trials, where he had to defeat each Thundercat. And that was the one especially that they really respected him and said, okay, now instead of just us having to call you the Lord of the Thundercats because you're Claudius' son, now you actually earned it. Like you beat Panthro, you beat Chitara at her own game, you beat Tigra. And that was an important one to just kind of say, all right, he's starting to earn it. Sometimes royalty earns their place.
That's the interesting thing about earning it, is, I mean, Duke never earned it. He was always Duke. At least with Optimus Prime, you got some past episodes which kind of showed where he came from a bit. But in this one, you start from him being like 10, and then.
Yeah. I guess you could say Duke earned it before we saw, like, he earned his sergeant stripes off screen, right?
Yeah.
But then, like, that's part of the fun of watching the development, and when a soldier just has his stripes and that's it, and it's done, and he never gets promoted to colonel, even, like, that's just Duke is and always will be the first sergeant. It's also cool to see a cartoon like this where you see some evolution.
Hawk just sort of showed up and took the title, and that was the end of that.
Yeah.
Thundercats, I was actually thinking about it. Anyway, when we get to the episode, we'll
right. So Exodus, first episode of Thundercats, original air date, oddly, January 23rd, 1985. So not like we were saying before, not a fall show. It's a January 23rd, 1985 debut. It's a standalone. Well, it's looking at the episode titles here. Exodus is called Pilot Part 1, and then the Unholy Alliance is Pilot Part 2. So even though it's a two-parter with Unholy Alliance, this one stands on its own, and they do cram a lot of stuff in this origin story here, enough to give you a new setting, introduce all the characters, give you a hint of what their characters are like, and a battle too. Squeeze a battle in there.
Was it an hour long?
No.
No?
This first episode's a half hour, and then the second part of it is a half hour. So, minus commercials, you put them together, and the pilot is an hour long. But if you can't watch the second one, then it stands on its own. I
always felt as a child that when you sit down and you watch an episode, it also felt like 3 hours, and then you kind of build yourself up. And it feels longer. I remember, because as I said, my adult mind is trying to come to terms with what my child mind remembers, and it felt like anyway. I guess we're about to see what happened.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about going back and revisiting these with adult eyes and being able to enjoy once again what we enjoyed as kids, see different perspective, appreciate things we didn't appreciate back then, and also pick up certain things that we didn't pick up back then. But Exodus, pop in your Thundercats DVD if you've got one of them, wherever it may be streaming. I don't think it's streaming in very many places, but we're starting off at the very beginning. We're in the black, and here's your countdown. 3, 2, 1, play. And it starts with the classic intro. Sometimes pilots don't start with the intro that we all know and love. I'm thinking of like mostly live action shows. And I appreciate that this one, right off the bat, has this incredible animated intro.
Arguably one of the best animated intros of all time, really. Look at this. Phenomenal stuff.
It's so good that I forgot that the rest of the show didn't look like this.
Indeed. It's the quality of motion, the rapidity, the expression. It's just... And it's funny enough, is even though we have fantastic animation techniques now, we don't see them mirror even a half of the attitude that this has.
Yeah.
Mumm-ra, one of my favorite villains of all time.
It's interesting. Some of the characters in 80s cartoons had the big transformation moment, the Hulk and Rodimus Prime in the movie, up from Hot Rod. The villain is the one with the transformation in this show, as well as Silverhawks and Monstar.
Arguably, you can say it's because he is one of the few, I suppose, everybody who's really true to themselves. Mumm-ra is the one who's lying all the time. That's why he has to change. I always wondered to myself, I didn't really realize that they weren't wearing anything. And I was like, well, that's such strange. But then I kind of thought about it once again through the adult eyes, and I realized that they're not wearing anything because it kind of represents that innocence, really. Almost like they're leaving, they're innocent now, and they're about to, embark on something where they'll actually need something more.
Yeah, I think there's, the show definitely feels a lot like Lord of the Rings to me, and Lord of the Rings has a lot of biblical influence. J.R.R. Tolkien put a lot of the Bible into, and he did it masterfully because it didn't really beat you over the head with it. The themes recurred, and it's kind of a Garden of Eden type of feeling. And some people, they laugh at it and they think it's so bizarre and weird. Naked Thundercats, like, okay, that's one way of looking at it, but the other way of looking at it is in a more, not totally not sexualized manner, but Garden of Eden manner. And there goes the Garden of Eden. Boom.
It's done.
It's done. And because they are no longer in the Garden of Eden, much like Adam and Eve, it's time to put some pants on.
It's true.
Because it's going to be a bit chilly from here on in.
It's about to get rough.
Yeah. So the lesson is there. It's there if you want to think about it and not just think about how ridiculous it is that they're naked. Like, there's a reason. There's actually a reason why it was done that way. And times have changed, and now anything remotely looking like this, that's all that, you know, a lot of people want to talk about, but they lose the lesson. And I think it's an interesting lesson in the journey of the story from beginning to end.
Absolutely. People tend to lose the idea of what symbolism is and what it means. And they just look at it at face value. And that, unfortunately, is kind of an echo. We see a lot of what happened today. They don't see it as, you know, representative of something, part of a journey.
So the question is, why is Jaga wearing clothes?
Because he's an authority figure. He's wise. He's experienced. He's already
old.
argued.
He's
Well,
old. He's cold. He's cold. Old and cold.
Maybe it's the word experienced.
Yeah.
Because he's already experienced, as opposed to the other Thundercats who've never experienced anything horrible or anything that has given them any kind of growth. Because he has had the experiences, he has already had to assume this kind of protection in order to, you know, he understands that his I suppose if we go with the reference to the Garden of Eden, he understands that he is naked and therefore he must be clothed. The others have not come to that realization as yet.
Right. And the stuff that he must have gone through, especially later on, they hint at his relationship with Groon the Destroyer, the rogue Thundercat. So he's seen some horrors before the planet even blew up, and that's why when it blows up, they're all heartbroken, and Jaga's like, "Yeah, that's a shame." But it doesn't devastate him the way it does the others because he's a warrior.
Yeah, to quote Hook, it's like death would be the start of a wonderful journey. So the destruction of that is just another start to another one of his journeys.
So 5 minutes into this episode, the heroes have already gone through unimaginable, unspeakable horror that most other heroes in other shows never had to even come close to. Their planet blew up. The only other character I can think of is Princess Leia, who's gone through something similar. I mean, you got to assume that Lion-O's father and mother, if he still had one at this point, cousins, all gone. Everyone's family's gone. Boom.
That's a shocking thing for the start of a children's cartoon. But it's interesting that Rankin Bass was willing to use that old Don Bluth adage, which is simply you can put children through a lot of stuff as long as it ends well. They were willing, they didn't trivialize the matter. They didn't take the kids away from Shire. They were willing to show them that they started in the worst adversities. They have nowhere. It's just these 7 characters. That's it.
Yeah. And Rankin Bass is always, well, usually forgotten when talking about the great classic animation studios of Sunbow and Filmation. I mean, I feel like Deke even gets brought up more often than Rankin Bass does. That might be
infamously so.
And that might be because Rankin Bass only had the Thundercats and the Silverhawks. And as far as all-time classic rewatchable cartoons, Thundercats is definitely up there. Silverhawks, as big a fan as I am, there's just no substance. None. I'll put it on every once in a while and then not feel like I have to put it on again for a while because there's just no substance to it.
There's one episode of Silverhawks that I have watched repeatedly, and that's of course where Quicksilver is cloned. I love
that's
that
a good one. Yeah,
that's, to me, that's like the best one. The rest of them are kind of, you know, maybe not.
When I was doing the history of Quicksilver, I was really trying hard to find something on Quicksilver to show what a hero he was, and that was the episode that really was filled with moments of actual substance for Quicksilver.
Yeah, absolutely. Because he was, I think it was one of the few times where he was by himself. He kind of went rogue for that one.
Yeah, he gets worked up too. He gets a little emotionally compromised in that episode, which is, I think, the only time he ever does.
Yeah, but that's important.
Get a space battle here. These guys haven't had a bad day, enough of a bad day. Their planet blew up, and now
there are people on those ships. They are dead. That's.
Yeah. I had totally forgotten that there were more survivors.
Yeah, there were a bunch of them. They were like, I think it was 8 ships, and now they're all gone. It's just these guys.
That's
it's
horrible.
Just these Thundercats. I know, right?
That's heavy. Hey, if they ever actually get around to making that live action Thundercats, which I hope they don't, because these won't work in live action. There's no iteration, costume, CGI, nothing design, nothing can work in live action. Some things are just meant for animation, but
absolutely.
I mean, you don't really need to go darker and heavier than this episode.
I think 2011's attempt at rebooting Thundercats was a very honorable attempt.
I liked it. Yeah.
They did a good job. The animation, the voice actors, everything. There was a lot of character and a lot of flair to it. And I'm actually upset that they never continued it. Why are they using spares? They just have shit. Anyway. Even.
Whoa, the guy just caught a mace, a flail.
One of those is in his hand, and he
shatters it. He didn't just catch it, as if that wasn't awesome enough. He shatters it in his hand.
Well, Wily Kit and Wily Cat were actually an example of children who weren't annoying in a show. I love that.
They were, as their name implies, they were wily.
Yeah.
What they lacked in strength and experience, they made up for in wiliness, in cleverness.
It's true. They also carried their weight, which I appreciate. You know, they were always willing to help.
They weren't usually, sometimes they were used for it, but they weren't always the damsel in distress.
No, thank goodness. Like a lot of child character gets discredited as that sort of thing, and they weren't. And I do appreciate Rankin Bass as well as the writers of the show for giving them some degree of depth. Yeah. Snarf, on the other hand, well,
he tries. Great moment here of Lion-O just doesn't have the strength to lift the sword, but sometimes the sword will give you a helping hand.
That's a courageous line for a 10-year-old. You will not have the sword while I live.
Yeah, I miss days like this of heroes like Lion-O, who literally what he was saying there is, you'll have to kill me.
You'll have to kill me.
That's not a mentality a lot of people want to employ these days, because they're just absolutely terrified of dying. And you ask them, well, what hill would you die on? And none. No, absolutely none. Well, you have to have a hill to die on.
The hill of self-preservation. It's not enough. It's not enough.
Wow. What a moment.
Someone animated this.
Incredible.
Look at the musculature. Look at the struggle he had to lift that sword. The animator understood this. And that's something we miss out on. Somebody, they let the computer do it. Someone thought and was like, yes, look at the bicep with the tricep. The tendons here would be straining. And they put that in there. And I miss that as an artist myself.
Especially nice thing about having you on this commentary is you noticing that and pointing it out for us, because what AI can't do is put soul into it. An actual animator, an artist, put not just his whims, but his soul into it. And an AI is an awesome impressionist, but it has no soul. It has no soul. And there'll always be that little missing thing about AI. We'll always look at anything AI, computer generated, and always like CGI. The most realistic CGI, we'll always look at it and go, those dead eyes, you know?
Yep, it's dead eyes. It's excellent at doing an impression of, but not so good at it. It can only mimic. It can only mimic.
Very small voice cast on this show too.
It's true. I think it was like 18 people or 12 people for the whole thing.
Very small. I know the voice of Tigra is also the voice of Wily Cat. Chitara is the voice of Wily Kit. Panthro was the one guy who was like, well, we can't give you much because you have such a Earl Hyman was such a distinctive voice that he didn't have too many other roles.
I do believe, I'm not sure about this, but I think Jaga and I think mumm-ra is the same voice actor, I believe.
Yeah, possibly Snarf too.
Possibly Snarf as well, that's true. Ah, yes, the sacrifice. Ooh.
Just to do him credit and justice, Bob McFadden was the voice of Holy Lord. Take a look at his voice cast list on Thundercats. On Behind the Voice Actors, he was Captain Shiner, Mongor, which is one of my favorite Thundercat characters. Mad Bubbler, Polly from Captain Cracker, Snarfer, Snarf, Mamut, Slythe, Vultureman, Groon, Tugmug, Driller, Rataro.
He was everybody.
He was a lot of people. Yeah. So he wasn't mumm-ra, but he was a ton of people.
Lionel lost his mother. He lost his father. Now he's about to lose his mentor.
Yeah, it's heavy. I don't know. I wonder if this is why a lot of our generation can roll with the punches, because we grew up on guys like Lion-O, who, I mean, how much worse can his day get? But the message was, you keep going. You just keep walking on.
He had friends on the ships that just blew up. He got attacked by the mutants, and now it's not a good day.
If you just keep walking on, then you might just wake up with a six-pack. Like,
you know what?
Oh man.
So this part here is not something you see often. See how he's wasting away?
Yeah.
His whole skeleton, he's becoming skeletal.
Yeah.
Look at that. Rough. The emaciation. Look, that drop on the floor, that's a reminiscence of not life force, but that's like blood almost that fell on that hit the ground.
We were spared that with Obi-Wan, who just disappeared, but Jaga he wasted away for what I'm assuming is years.
Yes.
It's one thing to sacrifice yourself, jump in the line of a bullet or a bomb to sacrifice yourself for your loved ones. But what Jaga just did was he suffered for years. And
absolutely.
It's like, if that doesn't get you a ticket to the afterlife in blowing blue ghost form, then I don't know what does.
To continue the biblical references, he carried the cross up the hill.
Yeah.
He didn't just pass away. He carried that cross up that hill with literally carrying the lives of the other Thundercats to a better place.
So another thing I appreciate about this show is that even though it was, supposed to be a toy commercial show, what Rankin Bass tried to do is explain things as realistically as possible, despite the fantasy element of it. Lord of the Rings is very similar too, and Rankin Bass did the Lord of the Rings animated films. So a lot of the rules of Lord of the Rings seem to apply to this, but all this stuff that they make, the Thunder Tank and the lair, and where's all the materials coming from? Well, that giant ship they crashed on.
The ship, exactly, absolutely.
That'll last them years.
Not only that, there was a reason for all of these things. They were exploring. They were trying to build something from nothing. Yes, it was a wonderful toy, but in the show, it had a practical use.
Yeah. Do you know if there's a reason why did his pod malfunction?
Yes, his pod malfunctioned as opposed to everybody else's.
I always assumed when I was a kid that it just malfunctioned. Now, today, I wonder if it was just destiny. If that malfunction might have been a little bit of possibly divine intervention.
Well, it could be two things, eh? If we go on cat biology, when a young lion becomes of age, it gets bigger by nature and it gets its mane and all that sort of thing. So with the death of Jaga, maybe perhaps that's what happened, essentially, because Jaga was no longer their leader. He came into his own and into his prime, which
just genetics, just nature.
Genetics, absolutely. That's nature. One way of looking at it.
See, the thing I wondered about was then why didn't Wile E. Kit and Cat also grow just as old as he did?
That is absolutely true.
They seem to stay generally the same age. So, yeah, like I said, I used to think it was a crack in the sleep pod that caused the aging, but now I kind of wonder maybe it was just a force watching over all of them, going, being a little kid isn't going to suffice on this new dangerous planet. You're going to need a little more muscle on you.
You're going to need to put on some size there, Junior.
So cracked it did. I'm sure it cracked and caused it, but what caused the crack? I think it might have just been a little bit of destiny at play there.
Monkian has the craziest speech tick.
So all those other mutants are gone too, right?
That's one thing I was thinking. I remember them. Yeah, there are a bunch.
He's adapted to his new body fairly well. I guess cat, right? Yeah,
Yes.
he's limber. He's instinctive.
And if you look at the majority of the things attacking him, lions eat these things.
That's true. It's really interesting. Looking at it from the animal kingdom standpoint, he is the king of the jungle.
Yes, absolutely.
Just having a memory blip there. And there's the ghost of Obi-Wan, Jaga. I really like how Jaga isn't there to get mushy with him and wax poetic. He's just there to tell him, do this. Why? he doesn't have much patience usually he's nice. He's not rude, but he delivers it curtly and disappears. He's not there to chat about the old days.
Yeah, he tells you the direction to go in.
Right.
Look at I always like the way he disappeared, where he wraps the cloak around himself and disappears back into mystery. Whoosh, gone. Oh, here we go. Watch the muscles, especially on the arm. Look at that. Oh,
I love this whole mystic aspect of the sword. You can't explain it with science. It's just magic. It's some kind of unexplained power, and it wakes them all up.
It's funny enough. It's the whole aspect of not only its loyalty, their strength is because they're always outnumbered. It's not necessarily that they're stronger, but they're loyal to each other. They have each other's backs, and that may seem like magic to people who don't understand the concepts of loyalty and being together as being strong. But to them, it's always been they're a pride of lions. You know what I mean? They're a pride of cats.
It's also really impressive to me is that when they team up, they can't be beat usually, but they still adhere to their code. Like they're never going to really throw their weight around and go, oh, we so bad, let's take the planet over. They always have that conscience about them.
In the third season, I do believe they actually form a coalition between, I think it's Hachiman, Mandora, and a bunch of, I can't remember what the coalition is called, but they, at the council table, it was a round table scenario. No one was at the head, no one was at the foot. It was round. Everyone was equal.
Oh, that's cool. That's like Arthur's round table.
Absolutely. It's very Arthurian.
Which they even bring Excalibur into one of the episodes later on, right? So
that is true. And Merlin does make an appearance.
This is a great moment right here. He's getting his confidence, and then he's literally too big for his britches. His shirt is torn because he's outgrown it. So just a little humbling moment here for him.
Always good for every leader to be humble.
What a spectacular first episode. 21 minutes. They cram a lot into it. And there's still so much to show.
Even this end credit scene, look at what they're showing you. Imagine being an investor and this is the pilot. They're showing you where we can take you. What are these places? Where do they belong? What is this planet you have brought us to? This in itself is already a trailer for what is to come. It's the artists and the people who designed this, all of these people who worked on this were titans of their time.
Incredible. So artistic.
It is. It's beautiful. Whoop. I forgot about the Rankin Bass logo.
And telepictures. Awesome. Fantastic. Oh, thanks so much for joining me for this one.
Thank you for inviting me. Now I kind of want to watch the whole thing, all 67 episodes or whatever it was.
I think we need to watch the second episode if you got time.
I have all the time to watch the second episode.
You do? Okay.
Of course.
Well, and we're calling an audible on the fly here. We're going to actually watch Unholy Alliance, which is part 2 of the pilot. So if you want to keep listening along with us, or just listen along podcast style, even if you don't have the episode, enjoy. We're at the very beginning of the Unholy Alliance episode. Here's your countdown. 3, 2, 1, play. And we get the intro again. Yeah, it didn't even occur to me. We didn't even see the villain of the show in the pilot episode. That's how strong that episode was.
They can't give you too much. They already gave you the destruction of a planet, death of a mentor, the maturing of the hero. There's a lot of stuff. So, I mean, save something for dessert.
Yeah, that hasn't been as long for me as it has for you. I remember watching them all the way through a couple of years ago. And plus, I've seen clips here and there from doing videos over the last couple of years. But I have a vague memory. That's why I kind of thought it happened in the first episode, of all of the reinforcements just disappearing, it might not even be in this episode, but I seem to recall something happening where they lose all their reinforcements and it evens the odds a little bit.
I've only ever, of all the cartoons of the past, this is the only intro that I have watched on repeat at least once a week because I love the song so much. And I do remember the 1,000,001 Mutants certainly becoming just 3. And I cannot remember what happened. I cannot for the life of me remember. Yep, there's the smash ship. Continuity, right where they left off.
Yeah.
Yes.
How strong this guy is. That's a bad combination of strength and anger.
No.
With great power comes great destruction.
And he's gonna bend that, is it? Don't bend that. Come on,
of course.
Man.
He can break a mace.
With his hand. Oh, here it comes. Oh. Oh.
They turn everything into a game.
It's
even survival.
It's the Lemba spread of the Thundercats.
Oh yeah. Tiger was always my favorite. I mean, Lion-O was the hero, the main character of the show, but every kid has that one character that's not the main character that they go, that's my guy. If, aside from the main guy. And for Transformers, it was Ironhide, and for Thundercats, it was Tigra.
Funny enough, for me, it was still Lion-O. I don't know why. I suppose it. I don't know. I like the sword. it's
he had the claw shield. He had it all.
Yeah, he did. Certainly his equipment. His biggest downfall was his lack of self-confidence. He didn't know who he was.
I really appreciated he didn't have the attitude that so many turbo-revving young punks in cartoons
Absolutely.
had. He was willing. He could be a little stubborn here and there, but all in all, he was willing to learn. That's just refreshing when you see. You hear about it in wrestling a lot, right? Like young wrestlers sometimes don't want to learn from the previous generation, but it's when they really study those tapes and learn, they turn out to be an awesome wrestler.
Absolutely. It's the wisdom scenario. Oh, here we go. There's the claw shield.
The claw shield. Oh, I love that thing so much. I always wish I could have done that with a toy. But there's no way to fit the long. They never gave you the shortened sword to fit it in the claw shield. But the new toys can do that. Super 7 scratch that itch.
Indeed.
In a dozen different ways. Like there's the shield with just the sword hilt permanently into it, or you can pull it out.
Yeah.
Different versions of the claw shield. They've really scratched that itch.
Yeah, they really gave it their all with it. It's what happens when you put love and thought into designs, yeah? And it's one of those things that a lot of people need to understand is that profit follows passion, not the other way around. So the more passion you put into something, more than likely the people that echo and mimic your passion, they will buy into it as well. It doesn't come the other way.
Absolutely. Love is obvious. It's obvious when someone loves something. They say passion a lot too, right? Oh, that person's so passionate. But I think it's the love, because you can be passionate about something and, not have love. And I don't think that's a good thing.
No.
You need to have affection, admiration for it.
The virtues need to work together. If they're not working together, it's imbalance. And without balance, of course, you're going to fall.
I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking of here. Passion without love is Darth Vader. Extremely passionate character. Very passionate, but devoid of love.
That is a good one. I didn't think of that.
And I didn't, that's not mine. I remember reading that somewhere or hearing someone say that when they were doing a documentary on Star Wars, but that's the whole warning of the Sith operate with passion. You know, the Jedi are without passion. It's because
Right.
that particular brand of passion is devoid of love.
Is this what happens? Is that how
Well,
I see
this might be what I'm thinking of.
I think so, because they certainly seem to be in trouble. You know what's funny? They were just flying over the ruins of a city, not just Egyptian ruins, but also what looked to be destroyed parts of another civilization, which always kind of cues me in as to why Mumm-ra is one of the better villains. Because before the Thundercats and the Eye of Thundera and the Sword of Omens arrived on this planet, Mumm-ra was the dominant power.
They're the visitors.
They are the visitors.
They're
This was his
trespassing.
world. They are indeed.
They're
And
trespassing.
no matter who they meet, the Burbles, the Amazon warrior woman, all those, everybody knows who Mumm-ra is.
Yeah.
So he's the ruler here.
Interesting dynamic. Usually it's like the evil bad guys invading, but in this case it's the wayward heroes who have lost their home and they just happen to stumble on this guy's planet. They're stuck here. They're stranded.
Absolutely.
But he's, you know, it's like, hey, get off my lawn, basically.
And he's old enough to say that.
he's what, millions of years old?
Some couple millions, I'm sure. What's also interesting is that the Eye of Thundera, as Jaga said it in the first episode, is a source of good and it's a source of justice and wisdom and power and all these things. And Mumm-ra he might be wise, but he uses that wisdom for evil. So the dropping of the stone, the Eye of Thundera here, and the emergence of this powerful force for good probably woke him up because he probably felt like, oh, something's different.
Once again, destiny at play here. You know, why this particular planet? Why all these events in this order? Could be destiny.
If this world had existed in darkness for so long, it was out of balance, and therefore by nature it was attempting to perhaps balance itself. You know what I mean? So maybe this is looking into it too much, but certainly the idea of it is there.
It's possible. I mean, Rankin Bass put these ideas in there so that you could actually go back 40 years later and speculate about this. Like, there is so much substance to this show. You can't do this with a Silverhawks episode. We can talk about some of the cool, fun things that happen in a Silverhawks, but there's not going to be any very deep philosophical discussions about Silverhawks. That's not what the show was intended to be. It was actually the antithesis of this in technology and the bionic upgrades and stuff, rather than the spiritual.
The mystic spirituality.
Right.
So interestingly, Mumm-ra, the ever living, the idea that so he's a spiritual creature as well, but interestingly, as he gave into his own passions and such, the spirits of evil, he is, and anybody who's watched the series out there knows he's a slave to it. He's a slave to them, the ancient spirits.
Interesting.
Yep, it's all about the Eye of Thundera.
So the show is in our future, right? This is Earth.
That is funny enough. I think I can't remember his Dreamwave or IDW when they rewrote it. This is Earth that we are on, and Mumm-ra was responsible for its destruction.
Okay.
And he gave in to this. He asked the spirits of evil to give him the power to conquer the Earth, and he did so. And this is why the Earth is indeed his. He does rule the Earth, which is, of course, now the emergence of this new power has him kind of, has his wrappings in a bunch, and he wants to get them back off his lawn, so to speak.
When I was growing up, I wasn't sure if it was in the distant future or distant past, like before the dawn of mankind. I mean, the pyramids are so old, it's hard to say, but these days I kind of side with the group that say this is the distant future.
Yeah. I think even in the last of the Panther said it's the third planet from the sun in this system.
That makes it pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Plus, you have visitors from other planets that seem futuristic, like Mandora. And then Safari Joe just seems like a throwback to the old Safari Hunters, right? So,
and Hachiman was pulled from Thunder's past.
There you
And
go.
he's a
Samurai.
samurai. That's a samurai.
That pretty much settles it. But as I always say, if you want to believe the other way, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, have fun with it. What's the harm in coming up with your own headcanon and reasons why it might be true as well?
Absolutely. This is for whoever the viewer to have fun with. And the more that's left, the more clues they give without actually blatantly stating what it is, man, the more you can come up with, and the more fun it becomes. I don't know if mumm-ra was a human though. I feel like that face, even on a decayed dude, that's eesh. Oh, here we go.
That's the voice of Lion-O as the voice of Jackalman, I believe.
What? Seriously?
Yeah, Larry Kenny is Jackalman. Wonderful, wonderful man. Had the chance to chat with him a couple of years ago.
That's true.
Yeah, he is.
And what's interesting is when you were doing that interview, if I remember the video properly, is when he actually spoke. I was like, wow.
It's Lion-O.
He sounds like Lion-O.
Yeah, it's
nice to be here with you, Michael. It's like, whoa.
It's not much of a performance there. Well, looking into his eyes was, I mean, just through the camera, not face to face, but kind of surreal because it's like Lion-O's looking at you. Those big blue, soulful eyes. You see Lion-O looking at you as you're hearing Lion-O speak to you. So I know he's Larry Kenny, the human being voice actor, but you just feel the presence of that character, and you realize, oh, you weren't really acting all that much, were you? You were just kind of sort of being yourself.
That's there we go. Here's the wisdom.
This is one of the parts where Jaga is like, listen, you stupid child.
Look at I didn't really look at the foreshadowing, because Wily Kit and Wily Cat early in the episode said, we have enough food. We don't need more food. And Lion-O just said, ooh, wild meat. I'm going to get some wild meat.
It's being
and
wasteful.
He's kicking his foot like a child. Oh, shucks. And kicks his foot.
That's fantastic.
An animator put that in there for him. He's a child, make him a child. Good.
I guess there were moments of Kenobi doing that as a ghost with Luke too, saying, hey, get your head out of your butt, stupid kid. You got to be the stupidest kid I've ever seen. So it's interesting to just in the second episode, the ghost shows up again, and instead of it'll be all right, he's like, give your head a shake, you silly brat. What are you thinking? And he puts him in his place. He's like, oh yeah. He doesn't throw a fit. He's like, yeah, the ghost is right.
And interestingly, as a sign perhaps of Lion-O's own maturity, he accepts the correction.
Yeah.
He kicks his foot, and sure, he acts like a child, but he certainly says, you're right, and I shouldn't.
Yeah, humility.
It's humility. It was a wonderful example.
Thundercats, ho! Calling for help again. That's another nice thing about Lion-O. He's not too proud to call for help.
That's right.
And why wouldn't you if you got Panthro coming to back you up?
What's funny is that he calls for help, but there's an episode where he actually goes in a duel with Hachiman when mumm-ra convinces him to fight Hachiman, and Lion-O says, in a duel, everybody loses. He never does it unless he absolutely has to, which I found phenomenal. Strength in numbers. And they're the kids pulling their weight.
They're the first ones that show up. Oh, he's so strong. He's so strong.
And run.
And they just disappear. Mumm-ra warped him out of there. I don't remember Panthro being so superhumanly strong.
Neither do I, funny enough. But
I don't use the word badass very often because I think it's very overused. So being a person that doesn't use the word very often, unless I'm talking about Snake Plissken, I'm just saying Panthro is an ultimate badass here.
His ability to... It's nice that he never loses it. That kind of attitude with the strength.
Yeah. Nice little moment there where, let me pull my weight. Let me earn my stripes. it's really wholesome show, very uplifting and
It's
inspirational.
true.
It's almost like you could almost sell it as a Christian show these days for how it just tries to be uplifting and supportive.
Well, most of the core virtues of a lot of religions carry that very similar weight. So most heroes should possess most of those virtues, which is a big problem, of course, we had in the 90s where all the heroes were a little darker, like so guilty.
I mean,
So-
nothing against Batman, but something against 100 shows trying to be Batman, right? Batman worked because he was the opposite of all these guys. But then when it becomes a trend, it's like you start to really long for that Captain America again.
Ugh. When everybody's Batman, nobody is. It's one of those things.
Except Kevin Conroy.
Except Kevin Conroy. Oh God
There's
rest
the
his soul.
transformation. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I never thought about it that way, but Mumm-ra is a slave to these ancient spirits of evil.
Absolutely.
He is always pandering to them and at their mercy. Sometimes they punish him by not letting him transform, or
just flat blasting him. They have been. He's the most powerful enemy in the whole series, but these creatures who they never fight really put him in his place.
Mm.
I
He
know
just
it's funny.
sticks it in a tree, really?
You know what? That's like in our country. That's liberate tar pits. That's what we used to pave our roads.
Now, I wonder with Rankin Bass's attention to detail with the animation, if his finger's going to stay tar stained for the rest of the episode.
Oh, I wonder.
Although we shouldn't be watching for the finger.
No, it's all I see now.
Oh no, he's used that trick too many times.
You want to see something funny? This ancient spirits of evil have no power without mumm-ra, and he's no power without them. It's an abuse.
Symbiotic.
It's a curse. It's cursed symbiosis.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't think they could just pick another minion like Slive?
I don't think Slythe really believes in the mysticism, and he uses that excuse later. He says, we don't have enough technology to beat the Thundercats. He goes on to say that. I think they need someone who's inherently afraid of the superstitious.
Yeah, I wonder Groon the Destroyer maybe being a ghost? You're definitely mystic if you're a ghost. You definitely believe in spirits.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's trying, but the tar.
Come on, Lionel.
The
Get it
gooey
together,
tar.
boy.
Look at that beautiful animation. So it's funny. It's a mystic sword, but if it's physically covered, it loses its power.
That is true. He's still going at it. He does. Ooh. There's the wow.
I'm expecting that.
Look at the detail even when the trees are shot. He caught a tree.
Wow.
I don't remember that, but all right.
The claw shield broke it in half. I don't remember the shield being that powerful. And it's such a knockdown, drag-out fight, and then it ends on the most Lord of the Rings style of thing, right? Like, just reflection. That's all it took to beat him.
It's true. Something so simple.
He is nasty looking.
It's the irony is that he has become so powerful, but the reflection of what he actually looks like probably reminds him of all that he's had to sacrifice to reach where he's reached. He's probably ashamed of it. So
and the reflection is the smaller mummy version of him, right?
It is, because he knows that's not his true form. He's a shriveled old corpse.
That so much depth.
And
or maybe he's just seeing a piece of spinach he missed.
I've been giving all my monologues with something in my teeth.
It's always fun to try to go a little deeper into these old cartoons that sometimes or usually don't really have that much depth, but it's easy with Thundercats. Like it's in there. They really crammed it full of all these different themes.
What's also interesting is that the dialogue is not infantilized. If you go and you watch, like, unfortunately, have to like Paw Patrol or something like that, they really infantilize the dialogue. But this was for the same age group, that 5 to 8 year old group, and
Yeah.
they didn't dumb down the dialogue. These children were learning something from this. Also, their grammar and vocabulary would have been growing because children absorb the way that
Yeah.
people talk. They know how heroes speak.
Check out how mumm-ra just quietly slinks away. he's been humbled too.
Not a word.
The one thing I remember hearing some of the voice actors say is that they were asked to deliver a little slower, and I do notice that the delivery is speaking a little more deliberately because we're speaking to children. So that's the one thing I always have to get over when I'm listening to it, because they definitely didn't want to speak this normal adult language too quickly.
Right. That makes sense.
But it's nice. It's kind of more of a chill, laid back vibe. The more deliberate way of speaking.
It also adds a lot more gravity to what is
Yeah.
being said.
Yeah, big time. Except Snarf. Snarf doesn't follow the rule.
Shoo, Snuff. Be gone.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. That's it.
The
That's
lovely landscapes.
That's the 2-parter pilot of Thundercats. What a lovely time this has been. Thank you.
Thank you. I would have not been able to. I wouldn't have conceived to watch it unless you brought it to my attention. And it said 85, right?
Yeah.
85, 95, 2005. This is like almost 40 years. Almost 40. It's almost as old as mumm-ra. Oh my gosh.
It's definitely something to be very proud of.
It is, absolutely.
And I think it's important to say, because even though the show exists because of the toys. I don't think the show would have been made without the toys. It's a different era. Just a few years before, in the 70s, the Rankin Bass Lord of the Rings existed because of the book. Right? It wasn't pushing a toy line, although there might have been toys, I think. But it was more about the story is what was the driving force. And in the 80s, it was more about the product that was the driving force. And we got lucky if the product came with a really good story. But even without toys, it's important to say, even without the classic LJN toys, even without the Super 7 figures, this show is awesome. It's nice to have. I really enjoy having some of those new Super 7 figures. But even without it, this show is awesome and can be enjoyed without any merchandise along with it.
I absolutely, for sure, because they had created something that was actually solid, as opposed to, it wasn't solely on a commercial basis. That was a part of it, but it wasn't the sole reason. And I think that sort of adds something to the playability as a child, because even though that a child's imagination could be limitless, the toy was not insisting that it be played with a certain way. It was suggesting a play pattern to children. And once the children had the suggestion, they would go ham with the idea of where to go. And I think that mere suggestion is something that's important, and that they're not telling you, they're just suggesting. This is how we think it should look. How do you think it should look? As opposed to a lot of modern day programs where they're telling you how it plays with. And once you've completed the idea and the pattern that's suggested, it becomes boring. As opposed to this, which is almost 40 years in the future, still retains this timeless quality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that was awesome. I'm glad we got to do the second part too, because I was tempted to say, well, need to have you back on and do part 2 sometime, but in all honesty and based on experience, it would probably take 2 years to follow up, and we wouldn't remember the first episode.
It's only 65 episodes. We can, with 2 wins, 63 more.
And continuity throughout all 65 of them with a proper ending. One of the few shows that got a proper and not even rushed, not even, hey, we're getting canceled, wrap something up in 22 minutes, but like a proper send off and a fitting one too. I don't think it ended on a downer.
No, it ended with, as far as I can remember, a very positive outlook. They hadn't formed this empire that Lion-O mentioned in the first episode, but certainly they had made enough friends, and they had brought like a peace to the Burbles and the Amazon woman, and an understanding to all the creatures across Third Earth, as well as a few in the surrounding planets, that they knew that something positive was going to happen. So once again, it's a suggestion of a greater hope, and to give hope to the to this surrounding, to this community. That's as good as ending as you want.
Yeah, and it's refreshing too. It's refreshing. It's refreshing that the show is finite, because it's so easy to enjoy something and then feel like, well, what's next? What's next? When's part 2 coming out? When's season 3 coming out? And just have it be perpetual and never ending. But finite is fine. It's in the actual word. Finite is fine. And I kind of like that Thundercats is its own little self-contained original series. I do love the reboot because it's so in the spirit of the original one, but that one left me wanting more because it didn't get its proper send-off like the original one.
Absolutely. They had planned for 2 more series, but once again, that didn't come to be. I would love... That series was done with such a degree of respect to the original material and reimagined in such an imaginative way. I was hungry for more of it. And it is such a shame we didn't get the 2nd and 3rd seasons. I would have loved to have seen it. And even now, if they brought it out, I'd be first in line to check it out, because they were going to great places with it.
Well, that might be the next place we go to when we have you back for the cartoon commentary, to take a look at the Thundercats reboot and how they compare. Larry Kenney as Claudus. Talk about respect and reverence of the original series, bringing back the original Lion-O to play the father of the new Lion-O. It was a really good call.
That the actor who played Lion-O in the new series has quite the record of playing heroes. He was also Duke in Renegades as well. So
that was him.
Some iconic heroes. He almost has a like an MO. He's got that kind of voice, which makes him a hero.
That's awesome. I remember the voice of Duke in Renegades really capturing the spirit of Michael Bell's Duke and in his curtness, the rhythm, the curtness, the sharpness, the real military, old school military hero aspect of it, instead of trying to, be more badass.
He was a soldier, and it gave due respect to that. And what's even funnier is the original voice actor who played Duke played the Renegade's Duke's father.
Yeah, perfect.
Played the mother.
Yeah, I love seeing that.
Feed me all of the nostalgia bait. I will eat all.
Awesome. Well, we're going to sign off here. So thanks again, Hans, for joining me on this double feature commentary.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great.
And everyone out there, let you know again about Hans's Instagram. If you want to join that, link is going to be in the show notes. And we'll see you again on another cartoon commentary. Thanks for listening. Nerdmas Day.